All right, we are live. David, thank you so much for joining us for our first Wines of Prestige tasting.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, and we're so excited to kick things off with you. So since most of our members, I would suspect, know who you are, all of our attendees are from the US, and many of them have obviously been to Napa. But why don't you give us a little bit of a background on who you are, and then we can dive into talking about Sinegal Estate Winery.
That's great. Well, I would not assume that everybody is familiar with me and my project. There's over 1,000 wineries in Napa County alone, and I'm one of that. And so every time, even long-time visitors to Napa come, we always get new people exposed to our project. So we are a small boutique estate in the foothills of the Mayakama Mountains. The Mayakamas are the mountains that run the southwest side of Napa Valley. And our 30-acre property is in the foothills of those mountains, coming down into kind of the westerly flatlands. And it's a historical property that has been here since 1879. So a very historical place. The home that is my family's has been here since that date, continuously planted to vine since 1881. So tons of history. As is the case with every old property in Napa, there's a very interesting story behind every prior owner, including a phase of time where it went into disrepair during Prohibition. So very beautiful property that I bought and brought back to its original glory in 2013. This is a family, father and son project. And we've had a great time collaborating as father and son in turning the barn that was here on the property into a state-of-the-art winemaking facility. I'm actually in one of the salons right now that is part of that build out. Behind me, I have my own private collection. So a lot of interesting stories and working with my father and bringing this about. So we're almost to our 10-year mark of being in the business, and still small boutique up and coming brand, but we're getting some great recognition and accolades, having just received some of our first 100-point scores. So
Congratulations.
I see some questions coming in. Definitely want to start with the Sauvignon Blanc. So I can walk you through that right now.
Actually, tell you what, David, why don't we hold on the wine for a bit? We'll get to tasting in a moment. I know there's a few other questions that we'll get to, and then we'll dive right in. But so you were mentioned that you got the whole estate going with your father, and obviously, well, not obviously, people may not know that you and your father owned and managed Costco for a very long time. I don't know if you're still involved there, but so working together with your father in that context, whose idea was it to come over into the wine world? How did that come about?
Firstly, just to kind of set the record straight, when Costco first opened, it was a family business. My father as founder and me as 11th employee, were part of the founding team. There were other people certainly involved. Now it's been on the NASDAQ public exchange since 1986. So there's a lot of people that own a small part of Costco at this point, including big institutional investors. But yeah, so how I got into the wine business or decided to get into it, it's something he and I, my father and I discussed for many years as of interest. One, because of passion for wine, but also to see if he and I could, as a small business, could collaborate well together. Both two very strong-willed, opinionated people who knew a lot about consumer products. And we kind of went back and forth for about 10 years trying to decide upon exactly how we wanted to do it and where we wanted to do it. At one point, I was talking about doing something in Eastern Washington in the Red Mountain area, because I thought Napa was already a little bit played out, but we settled upon Napa. That kind of coincided with life change for me, in that I had just prior to that remarried and fell in love with this wonderful woman, and decided that it was the right time to pursue that passion for wine and start the winery and start a new family down here in Napa.
Oh, that's great. That's a nice story. How you, wine is always an important part of people's lives, so it seemed to dovetail nicely with how
Yeah, it
you were
was.
starting out.
Yeah, it was equal parts passion and left brain rationale. I did get into the business, and it's become much more of a vocation and
Mm.
less of a hobby than I had originally expected. But I still love it and enjoying the challenge of it.
That's one of the funny things. I've spent one harvest working at a winery, and you think before you go, it's going to be this romantic thing. And, it's, I don't know, you just envision that it's going to be glamorous or easy in some sense. But no, it's hard work. You're lugging pumps, you're cleaning barrels. It is not for the faint of heart. So it definitely has the vocational element, as you say, but also a lot of fun and a lot of passion.
For sure. No, that's probably what drew me to it. In addition to the love for wine itself, is it's one of the few cottage industries that I literally own the quality that is delivered in the finished product, all the way from the soil. So it's every aspect of it I control, totally vertically integrated, and so I find that part of it very interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's a lot of winemakers I speak to, they say that the wine is made if it starts or at least starts, if not is made in the vineyards, right? So obviously the grapes are quite important. So on that note, let's actually dive into the wines and the soils and the terroirs of the different wines that you make. So let's talk a little bit about that and sort of your farming practices, how you approach the actual viticulture of your wines.
Absolutely. Our estate is certified organic, and we practice sustainability such that we are a fish-friendly farm. We have a very large lake on the property, so it's probably the prize jewel of the actual estate. And so for all of those reasons, we really like to protect the ecosystem, but we also think some of those choices manifest in making superior wine. We do some biodynamic practices as well, although we are not considered a biodynamic vineyard, but we have kind of identified certain elements of the biodynamic process that we think are important to producing better quality wine grapes.
Such as what? Like what do you do?
We do soil amendments with teas that we create. So we'll amend the soil with different types of fermented teas that we produce that we think actually is very beneficial. We don't harvest or we don't farm according to the lunar calendar, and we don't have a ram's head buried in the northwest corner of the vineyard. Those are a couple of the things that biodynamic folks feel are very important and are part of what differentiates. But so we've kind of landed in that compromise place where honoring some of the ideas that we think are compelling and that add quality.
And so how much time would you say you personally spend in the vineyard? Are you there in your rubber boots a lot of the time, or more in the winery and on the business side?
I'm on both sides of the business. At this point in our own estate and the vineyards that we source from, the size that we've become, even though we're still small, our activities in the vineyard are more managerial, like observing the progress and the development and the health of the vines, the development of the grape clusters, and making farming choices. It's not so much out there with a hoe and a rake. We're to produce the amount of wine that we're talking about that we make here, even as a small project, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of acres of vineyard. So no, I'm not doing a lot of farming or picking at this point.
But you have your shears if you ever need them to go help out, I'm sure.
Well, absolutely. I mean, every block of every vineyard that we have, we're analyzing those grapes, and pretty much, especially this time of the year, we're out there looking at them on a daily basis and trying to evaluate things to do. Like, for example, 2 weeks ago when we had the extreme heat spike, we use shade cloth, which is a way of providing basically a canopy to diffuse some of the extreme sunlight and heat that hits the vines in the afternoons, which helps the vines to not get too stressed.
Interesting. Well, We'll ask you for a report on this vintage in a moment, but just turning from viticulture to the winemaking itself, is there anything particular about how you actually make the wines? Are you using a lot of natural fermentation and indigenous yeasts? Are you using inoculation? Are you using barrels? What's your winemaking approach?
Yeah, there's only a handful of people in Napa that are actually using natural yeast to ferment. And the truth of it is, most of the natural yeast that's in the air is introduced by people inoculating. So
I didn't know that.
yeah, so so we do indeed inoculate, and we use types of yeast that are hardy enough to because the main thing is puts you at risk of making a poor wine is if you get a fermentation that sticks and it doesn't convert from sugars to alcohol. And if you have to restart a fermentation, that's really, really bad for the wine. So so we do inoculate. We in terms of oak, we use exclusively 100% French oak for our Sinegal wines. And we source from about 15 different coopers. So only the best coopers and only the wood from the best forests. We do believe that the aging process is a very big part of the winemaking recipe. And so we're very mindful of not only just using good raw material, but then also marrying up the right grapes and the right wines or mini wines in our cellar with the right woods to achieve the desired outcome we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. And are you fairly involved in the tasting and the blending? And I don't know if you guys actually make any blends right now, but are you involved in the final product decisions, or do you tend to leave that to your winemaker?
No, I'm very involved in that. Yeah, so we have three blending and kind of wine evaluation milestones. One is what we call our primary blending, our primary evaluation. And it usually happens in February of, like this year, the 2022 harvest will happen next February. And that's really determining what we have in the cellar is AAA quality, what's AA quality, what's A. And at the chance that we have anything that's B quality or less, we will not actually use that wine, and we will sell it and to others who don't have the quality standards that we do. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, everything that we make is either AAA to A rated, and it's because of our unique approach we take to measuring and analyzing phenolic development, not just in the grapes in the field, but also the grapes upon receipt and the juice and wine during the fermentation process. So a lot of data, amazing amount of data involved in winemaking.
I was going to say, you sound like you're quite the high-tech operation. You're giving inventory a run for our money. We thought we were the tech company here.
Well, it's because we micro farm and micro ferment, that's part of our strategy. We'll have in any given year, we'll have, I think this year, over 80 separate lots that we'll make. So we make very small pick decisions, and we bring in anywhere from 2 tons at a time to 20 tons at a time, and usually erring to the smaller side. And so what that does is it creates basically a spice rack for us to build in the cellar, so then we can evaluate those different wines to figure out how they best marry up. But by doing it that way, you can then ensure that you're picking the grapes at their optimum phenolic development.
Mm-hmm. Which maybe for those who maybe aren't familiar with the term phenolic development or phenolic ripeness, do you want to just maybe explain that quickly?
Sure. There's 2 different types of ripeness to wine. One is your basic chemistry that speaks more to bricks. Like with any fruit you leave on the counter in your kitchen, over time that fruit will begin to oxidize and break down. And usually the sugars will increase with that. Well, that certainly happens with grapes, But in addition to that, not necessarily on a parallel path, the grapes develop phenolically while they're still on the vine. So there's this constant battle that occurs where you're competing with the fruit ripening and sugar's ripening, but typically the phenolics, the color pigment, the anthocyanins, the tannins, all of that develops at a different rate to the sugar ripening. And so there's a real knack in an art form to figuring out the right time to pick, because you don't want to pick the fruit when it's too ripe, because too ripe of fruit will ultimately manifest in wine that's too high in alcohol, because the sugars are what convert to alcohol. So it's always kind of walking that fine edge between chemistry ripeness and phenolic ripeness.
The alchemy of it, the magic of it. Well, before we dive into tasting, because I think everyone is pretty keen to get into the wines, why don't we start with our first sweepstakes question? So we have 4 sweepstakes questions laid out for you. 3 of them will result in the lucky winner getting an InVintory hoodie, which I promise you is the most comfortable hoodie you will ever have. I see Jared is here in the mix. He has won one in a prior tasting, and I think you will attest to this. And then the 4th lucky winner is going to win the tour and tasting at Sinegal, which is for 6 people, valued at $900. It was a very generous donation from Sinegal and from David, so thank you for that. And we'll save a good question for the end for that one. But let's start with one of the maybe easier questions. David, do you have the questions in front of you? Do you want to choose one that's worthy of a hoodie, or should I pick from the list?
Well, I don't know what the rest of I have 4 questions, so you have. It seems like you have more.
No, I had 4. We had 4.
Okay.
Do you want to pick one of the 4?
Well, let's do the key.
Oh, actually, you know what? Before you do, I should tell people the process, the rules. So everybody, when David asks the question, please pull up the chat and then write the answer in, but do not hit enter and send. And as soon as David finishes asking the question and says go, well, he'll give you a minute to think about it, but after a couple seconds when he sets go, hit send, and whoever is the first person to get it right in the chat will win the hoodie. So that's just the easiest way to do it. It's kind of hard for people to shout out in this format. So sorry, David, over to you.
Like a game show. This is great.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is, those of you who have bottle with you, you know what the label looks like, but see if I can get the glare to go away. Here is the label of the wine, Sinegal, Sauvignon Blanc. So the question to you is the key. What is the significance of this key?
Tough. I can almost hear everybody quickly Googling. We'll see if whenever you feel like they've had enough time, you say go.
Jared says that the hoodie is so comfy.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I get to decide when we've allocated enough time. I feel like we need Jeopardy music there.
Oh, wow. I can.
Okay. All right. So fire away, you guys. Am I waiting for someone to write something in the dialogue box, or what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, everyone should have written it and hit enter. Oh, Jared says the key to the front door. So the key to the front door of the original property. Oh, interesting guess. Any other entrants? Actually, you know what? I'm just realizing this doesn't send to the whole group. It just sends to the panelists. So you guys are welcome to enter your responses whenever you have them, since they won't tip off the rest of the group. Any other guesses out there? Otherwise, Jared will be winning potentially a second hoodie, which I'm sure he will give to his wife. Okay, no other answers. David, do you want to tell us what it was? And if Jared was right, is it the key to the original front? Oh, we have somebody, I think, who came in the Q&A. Just wait one moment. The grape. The
grape.
The grape.
I cannot see that.
No, that came in the Q&A. I think that was Richard. If you want to pop that into the chat instead of the Q&A, then we'll be able to see it.
Well, I think audibly I heard the response, And I'm going to have to give this one to Jared. Technically, it's what we refer to as the key to the estate, but more specifically, it is actually the key to the historical home. And it's this actual key that we keep in a shadow box in the tasting room. And we kind of celebrate the story and celebrate the key as an artifact. And,
That's a great story.
and Jim Peterson had the same answers, but a different way. So I'm not sure the two of you can fight over who gets that hoodie. I think we already have one, Jared. Maybe we should give it to Jim.
That is true. Jared, if you did officially win, but I think you have one. Yeah. So we'll let Jim have that one. Jim, congratulations. You won yourself an InVintory hoodie, and we'll be sending those around after the event. Jared, you still have a chance to win the tour and tasting though. So don't despair. All right, David, let me turn it over to you. Let's dive into our first wine, and then you can walk through all of the wines at your leisure and invite questions as they come. For anybody who would like to throw questions at David as we go through, please, we welcome them. You can drop them into the chat or into the Q&A, and I'll feed them to him. And let's get going with the wines.
Fantastic. Well, once again, the three wines that we selected for today is the first is the Sauvignon Blanc, the 2020 Sinegal of Sauvignon Blanc, which is some of the grapes come from the estate and some of the grapes come from a good grower partner in Napa Valley, the Gamble Ranch, which is in Yountville. This wine is a blend of Sauvignon Blanc and Sauvignon Blanc Muscat clone with a touch of Semillon. It's possibly our most crafted artisanal wine. It's fermented in oak barrels, the standard Cooper barrels that you coop the age in, and then it's actually sur lead bâtonnage, the dead yeast leaves for about 2 weeks after fermentation, and then it's aged in those oak barrels for a full 10 months, which is very unusual for Sauvignon Blanc. Those of you who have the wine with you, that bâtonnage and that aging imparts upon the Sauvignon Blanc that creme brulee mouthfeel and that weight, which is a signature element to our wine. Uniquely, the bouquet is very floral, and the taste of the wine is, I think, is more stone fruit than citrus or grass, which is once again a unique style for Napa and very distinctive from like a New Zealand style Sauvignon Blanc. Lastly is the acidity. On the back of your palate, you'll notice that it's a bone dry wine, and it's very, very bright, very acidic. So enjoy that.
We have a question on that for you, David. First, just a quick question from me. So with the barrels in which you're fermenting the wine and then aging them, I'm assuming those are older barrels because you're not importing too much oak to the wine, correct?
There is a touch of new used. It's about 30% new wood and 70% neutral oak. Neutral is a term used for barrels that have been exposed to wine before, so reused, if you will. But that neutral new composition is, like I said, very much a part of the winemaking recipe.
Interesting. Well, we have a question here. Do you commission the grapes from your supplier, and are there any special criteria that you require?
On here.
That came in the Q&A. I don't know if you can see the Q&A. You may not be able to see the Q&A, David.
Yes. Do I commission the grapes from your supplier? We have a grower that we work with. It's a third party, but he actually farms to our specifications. So it's handled like a long-term lease contract, to where we don't determine the vineyard rows necessarily, or the plantings, because that's already been established, but we chose to work with them on the basis of it supporting our program. But we make everything from disking decisions to soil amendment decisions to pruning decisions, and certainly picking decisions. So we pretty much have the same level of control to the farming practices with these growers that we work with as we do with our own estate.
Great. And then we did have one more question from Tiana that came through. It's not necessarily about the Sauvignon Blanc, but the question is, how do you decide what wines to make? That's a good question.
Well, that's there's two different ways I settle upon the assortment. Firstly, because the program and the project is very much an expression of the place that is St. Helena and the estate location. The cornerstone of our program is Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Sauvignon. Those two grapes are the varietals that are most conducive to this particular microclimate. So it would only make sense that those would be our two flagship wines. In addition to that, I would say the assortment has really evolved to being a combination of what is my personal style and my personal taste, and what am I drawn to? What excites me? What excites Ryan Knoth, the winemaker, and what we think that the market has an appetite for. And then the last leg of the stool would be, it's got to be something that we think is economically viable for us to buy the grapes and make the wine and to produce a high quality wine that's worthy of our name. So.
Good criteria. Good answer. Well, we have another question from Jim, just a clarification on the barrels. So he said, you mentioned that the barrels are from the best forest, and he was just confirming the country. You had mentioned all your barrels are French, right?
Correct. Yes, all the barrels are French, and we've experimented a little bit with American barrels, and we've experimented a little bit with Hungarian barrels. We think that there's potential for Hungarian barrels, but American barrels, just that the veining of the oak is just too wide, and it actually imparts too much wood upon the wine. It's more of what the aging process you want to derive from that experience is micro-oxidization, which kind of changes the complexity and the tertiary flavors and aromas of the wine, and allows for more binding of the wine with the color pigments and the tannins. So it's not really about wanting the wine to taste like wood, honestly. That's generally, broadly speaking, a characteristic of lower quality wine.
Yeah, you can tell when something has been made with oak extract. Well, Tiana also adds that the Sauvignon Blanc is absolutely delicious. So thank you, Tiana, for that. If anyone else has any impressions about the wine, we welcome those as well. Any thoughts? It is quite as David said, perhaps would you consider this your flagship, David, or would you say the Cabernet Sauvignon is more your flagship?
Well, certainly the Cabernet Sauvignon is our flagship. It's more broadly distributed, more widely recognized. Our Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve has got a pretty robust secondary market for it. So, yeah, I would say that that's probably our flagship.
Yeah, great. Well, before we move on to the next wine, let's do another question. Let's give away another hoodie. I feel like Oprah, hoodies for everybody. So I'll leave you to pick a question.
So I'll answer the question, or ask the question rather, in two different ways, or the two acceptable responses to the question. And I think I actually gave away the answer in a introduction. Either which was our first vintage of the project, or how many years has the project been in existence? Mike very quickly answered. Oh, wait.
There is a way to send it to everybody. Mike, you figured it out.
I was going to wait for a couple of more responses. Are they in the Q&As?
No, I don't think anyone else has sent in a response. If anyone else wants to take a stab, shoot them into the chat. Oh, Mike, that's okay. That was on me for the instructions. Jared has another answer, but doesn't need another hoodie. Well, should we find out if Mike was correct?
Well, Mike is correct. So
Mike is correct.
yeah, I can't let Jared corner the market here. So
He's
this
watching
vintage,
you do that. He's very intelligent.
this vintage that we are in right now is our 10th vintage. So I guess technically 10 years would be 2023. But yeah, so this is our 10th vintage. And I'm very proud to say, as we've gotten larger, our wine just continues to get better and better. So I'm really thrilled with how as we've evolved, our skill and our mastery of our art has continued to grow. We're sourcing better fruit, we're growing better grapes, and we're certainly making significantly better wine.
Great. Well, congrats, Mike. That's a hoodie coming your way, and you'll have to fight with Melissa over who gets to wear it. All right, let's move on to the next wine.
Those of you who have the Rosé, we have the 2021 Grenache Rosé that actually comes from Sonoma. So this is one of the wines that we've chosen to source elsewhere from St. Helena, from Sinegal Estate, and that's solely because Grenache is much more conducive to the cooler climate that is Sonoma. If we tried to grow this fragile grape here in Napa, it probably would shrivel up and die a very ugly death. So for us to make the quality of wine that we want to make, we found a great partner that we've been working with for the last 10 years to help us with Grenache. It's very traditional Provençal style of rosé, bone dry Grenache, and it's quite unique these days. Unfortunately, much of the rosé that's out there in the market is not single varietal, is blended by cheaper grape varietals, and frankly made with quite a bit of residual sugar. So whenever you go to a restaurant or a wine shop and you find a subset list of dry rosé, that's the special stuff, and that's what you want.
Well, good tip. Let's taste it.
Something else that people don't know or realize is that generally speaking, the Provençal style of wines have this much lighter kind of salmon color to them. But it being lighter in color doesn't necessarily mean it's of higher quality. Sometimes people perceive that. There are some very high quality rosés that have a little bit more color pigment to them. So cheers to you. Enjoying that glass of rosé. This is our first inaugural vintage of the rosé, by the way, and what we typically use to greet people here at the estate.
We had a couple of questions that came in the Q&A, David, that I'll just toss to you. The first was, how long do you keep wines in barrel? I think this was referring to the Sauvignon Blanc, but you can comment on any of the wines. And then the second question is, what is your target alcohol content? Again, you can comment on others.
Yeah, it really varies by varietal. It's a couple. Let's see. Answer the first question first. The Sauvignon Blanc is aged for 10 months from harvest until bottling, and then the rosé is really not aged much at all. I mean, we'll actually bottle the 2022 vintage sometime later this spring, because it's not really aged in oak at all, and it's really much more about the acid of the wine and its clean, crisp taste. Our reserve, that will, depending upon the vintage, it varies from 22 months to 24 months. So that's our wine that we age the longest.
Okay.
And then the other question was alcohol.
Target alcohol content, yeah.
Yeah, that once again, that varies greatly by varietal. inherently California or Napa Valley specifically, because it is so hot and there's so many days of intense sunshine out here, it's a real challenge to keep the alcohol content down by way of contrast to Bordeaux or to Burgundy. Our Sauvignon Blanc is in the high 12s, so like 12.8%, something like that. Let's see at the back of this vintage. Excuse me, no, actually, I stand to be corrected. It's 14%. Our Chardonnay is actually 13.5. And then our Cabernets, we try to consistently keep those right around 14.7, 14.8% alcohol. We just feel like too much alcohol kind of imparts upon the wine almost kind of a hot mouth finish. And actually can take away from some of the subtleties of it. So what did you guys think of the rosé? You like the rosé?
Jim would like to try it with some steak tartare, which I second that.
Interesting.
What would you pair this with, David?
Probably not steak tartare, but yeah, I mean yeah, sure. Anything raw would go well with the rosé. I think I was leaning more towards seafood or something like that, but yeah, absolutely.
It's one of the nice things about rosé. It's pretty versatile when it comes to pairing.
It is, and it's one of the wines I think that is when people think of rosé, they don't think of it as much as a food pairing wine as some of the other varietals.
That's true. It's a patio crusher with your friends a lot of the time. All right. So before we move on to the Cabernet, let's do one more sweepstakes question for a hoodie. And then after we've done the Cabernet, we will do our grand prize and open up to the Q&A. So the last hoodie question. And this time, everybody, please enter your answers. Let's do it the way we originally tried. Enter your answers. Make sure that you're sending it to panelists and attendees. And when David says go, hit send.
Okay. So this last one, I don't even think there's no way you would have to know this. And I don't think I mentioned it in my intro, but we're best known for our Cabernet Franc. It's not our flagship, but we're best known for our Cabernet Franc. Our recent 100-point scores we got from Antonio Galoni and Jeb Dunnig were both on our Cab Franc. And that Cab Franc is old vine. So the question is, what year was that old vine Cab Franc planted?
Oh, that's tricky. I don't know if that's something Google can easily tell people. So.
I don't think you can cheat and do a quick Google search on that one. So waiting, it's open to the forum, waiting for answers to that question.
Oh, Michael. Well, Michael only sent it to the panelists, so that's okay. We'll.
So I see Michael's guess is 1972.
I think everybody can hit their guesses into the whole group if you've typed it in.
72 is a solid guess.
1964, 2017.
That would make for a better story because that was my birth year. Ben Rodnicki says he knows the answer.
I would certainly hope so, Ben. Jim Peterson, 1880s.
You might have to be a little more specific, Jim, than that.
Just take a guess, Jim. We're going to apply Price is Right rules, so I would say shoot lower. And then, I think somebody might have...
Jared's chiming in.
Mike, 97.
We have better participation on this question. This must be a more interesting question for you guys.
I think I just I gave poor directions on the first few. But what do you think? David, is the answer in there somewhere, or do we need to give people another moment?
The answer is in there, but I'm actually kind of getting irritated that Jared is the one getting all the answers right.
Well, we'll talk
Jared,
to Jared about that after.
what's the deal, Jared? Did you like bone up for this before the conference? It's okay. Way to go, Jared. Apparently you did a little research on me before we got online. So the Cabernet Franc is our old vine Cab Franc planted in 1982. So it's 44 years old and still kicking, which is, certainly there's like old vines, Zinfandel, and but generally speaking, it's unusual for vines to continue to live, but they don't continue to thrive to be productive, usually for 45 years. So it's quite unusual. And part of that age actually adds to the character of the wine, which I think why the critics love it so much.
Great. Well, tell you what, for that one, I think the closest person who didn't overshoot, if we're playing Price is Right rules, was actually Michael with 1972. So Michael, there is an inventory hoodie coming your way. That was a good guess. And with that, let's move to the cab.
All right. So last but not least, this is our 2019 Select Series Cabernet Sauvignon. With the Sauvignon Blanc that you've tried, and now the Cabernet Sauvignon Blanc, or the Cabernet Sauvignon. This is designated a Cab Sauv, but as most of you probably are aware, that to market it as Cabernet Sauvignon, it's a Bordeaux blended wine. And so this is this particular vintage, because we vary it every year. It's 92% Cab, 4% Petit Verdot, 3% Merlot, 1% Malbec. So 20 months of age in 100% new French oak, or 95% new French oak rather. And it's fermented in both steel and open top Terranceau French cuvee casks. So this is the wine we've become best known for. In the United States, it's sold in 48 states. We actively promote on Vivino. There's a good community around the brand on Delectable. We have sold the wine into, I believe, 12 countries. And it's been showcased and featured at some of the best restaurants in the country, including Thomas Keller's Per Se in New York. And so, yeah, we're developing quite a name for ourselves with this wine in particular. So I invite you to pick up your glass. Firstly, give it a good swirl. Because of the way that we pick, because of the way that we make wine, because of the way that we age, our wines have a unique balance of acid and kind of concentrated fruit. It's plush and kind of hedonistic and enjoyable, but yet it still has tertiary aromas and tertiary flavors. And I think that's kind of our secret sauce, is that balance and that yin and yang of both of those things. It's become our house style, and it's kind of representative of the place that is this foothills of the Mayacamas. And we think it's a great place for us to land in a world of Napa wines that are over extracted, over alcoholed, and low in acidity. So it's very unique.
Well, for anyone who's enjoying this Cabernet or another Cabernet, I know we did have some people who had other bottles of Cabernet, whether the Reserve or the Estate. If you have any impressions to share, I see Jeff is having his 2016 Sinegal Reserve. So that's
a couple of things I wanted to speak to on that. I mean, the different vintages, every year we make the wine, we do want to have a continuity to our house style and have the wine be an expression of the place. But we also want it to be an expression of the vintage as well, because there's a story there to be told also. So, I've had the good fortune since 2013, in the last 10 years, having more good vintages than bad. Truth be told, the only catastrophic vintage we had was 2020, when there was smoke taint that was so prevalent throughout the area that we couldn't make any red wine at all. We chose not to, I should say. Some people have made 2020 Napa wines, and the red wines of 2020, I would caution you on those if you find them out in the marketplace. But broadly speaking, we've had many good vintages. Probably 15 was one of the hottest vintages. Very, very hot vintage. Makes for the wines are a touch more rustic in style, slightly higher alcohol content. But the Hell Mountain Cab, the 2015 Hell Mountain, is just beautiful wine, and it actually happens to be my father's favorite wine. He really likes the Hell Mountain.
That's the one Jared is having. So on that, how long would you say the aging window is for a wine like that, David, if Jared has another bottle tucked away?
Well, all of the wines that all the red wines we make, I should be more specific. Robert Parker characterized them as wines that would not peak in their development for a full 10 years of cellaring. So let's say it's 2013. If you have a 2013, now would be a good time to start to enjoy that wine, because it's probably not going to continue to improve and evolve anymore. So I think that holds true with all of our wines. That's Robert Parker's point of view. My point of view would probably be most of the benefit that you're getting through aging is going to happen within the first 3 or 4 years. After 4 years, I'd say go for it, because there's more good wine to appreciate after that bottle.
So Michael had asked for the 2014 cab, which he has. When is the peak for drinking? So you would say now is a good time to open that?
I would definitely say you should be drinking the 14 now. Yeah, don't wait any longer. You're going to run out of cellar space, and you're going to run out of days to drink if you keep holding wine for 10 years. Some of that is the commercial side of me speaking too, right? Because we in the wine business like wine to be drank, not wine to be collected under bright lights and celebrated as a collectible. We like people who drink wine.
Or at least to replenish their wares, if they do. And then the 2016, it sounds like, Jeff, you're opening it at a great time, the Reserve, because I'm assuming that would even have more stuffing. So now might be a good time to open that 16 Reserve.
Yeah, let me check my notes on 16 Reserve. I don't think I pulled my notes on the 16 Reserve. I remember the 16 Reserve being a little bit more forgiving. There was quite a bit of rain in 16. I don't believe it was quite as hot. I remember the yields being a little bit higher, but I remember it being really, truly beautiful wine, and a little bit more elegant than 15 rather. So I think I actually preferred the 16 vintage over the 15 vintage, but my personal style is more to that more feminine style.
Yeah, the more elegant. Interesting. Well, tell you what, we have 8 minutes left. I'm sure if David is okay, we can go a minute or two over. But let's ask our final question, the final sweepstakes question for the Grand Tour, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A and invite a few people to come up on stage, so to speak, to ask their question. So David, why don't you ask our last sweepstakes question?
Absolutely. So the question here is, what year was the AVA for Saint Helena designated? This is a hard one.
So we'll give everybody a...
You have to go deep in the records to figure this one out.
And Ben, you don't get to answer this one because I'm assuming you would know as well. So I think this is probably going to be a guess for most people. So just to, in the interest of time, everyone, let's do it. Throw your guesses in the channel and let her rip.
Oh, wow. 1860.
1860, 1983, 1992, 1901. Wow, quite the range. Jim, 1995. Mike, 1990, 1977. See if anything else came in the Q&A. Well, David, do you see it?
I do, actually. Well, it pays off to like all of these game show questions. It pays off to let everybody give their answers first, and then you can bracket them, right? So, Jim, you got it at 19 on the button, 1995.
Congratulations, Jim. So,
Tiana just looked it up.
Oh, October 11th, very precise. This year. Well, congratulations, Jim. Yeah, I know. I'm sure you had to dig for that one. Jim, I'll connect with you after and we'll coordinate that because I think you want a hoodie too. Gosh, you're having a good night, aren't you? All right. Well, with that, without further ado, you know what? I'm actually just going to do the Socratic method. And Jared, I'm going to call you up because you had listed a very good question. I'm going to invite you up to ask your question in person and promote you to a panelist. And then this way, David can see the man himself who's been answering all the questions throughout the evening. So let's see. I think I did it. Panelist, there he is.
All right. Yeah, sure. I could join. Hey, everyone.
Hey, Jared.
Hi, Jared. So you had a question that you wanted to ask David that you put into the.
Oh yeah. So I did have a question. I know. So with like the climate changing and everything, I think this is actually really great timing because we just were talking about the heat wave from a couple weeks ago, and you see Bordeaux having a lot of heat waves too, and trying, like as of recently, allowing some new grapes into their blends because of that. Some more climate hardy grapes, heat hardy, like Marcelon. So I was wondering if your estate was exploring other varietals that might be a little more hardy to heat waves and kind of more warmer temps as the years go on.
Well, because this little pocket where we're located was already, Napa Valley is already one of the hottest growing regions in, best known growing regions in the world. I would say maybe Sierra Foothills or Lodi is hotter than here, but generally speaking, for premium grape growing regions, this is already pretty warm, known for warm climates. And we're a very warm microclimate within that. Cabernet and Sauvignon Blanc are both pretty well suited to the weather still, even with where we're at. And this year, frankly, global warming is kind of a weird deal. It's like this year was actually a very temperate year. Mm-hmm. There's so much talk about global warming. There was that one crazy week, but notwithstanding that 1 week, I would say the average temperatures this entire growing season were actually lower than they've been the 10 years I've been doing this. So there's a lot of weird weather. We saw a lot of weird kind of humid days throughout the growing season at weird times. The last week we've had a lot of rain, which is very unusual. How global warming is manifesting itself is not just in higher temperatures.
I think it's more extremes, higher swings from hot to cold, Yeah,
one of the things that's the biggest concern for us is not the day highs, but the diurnal and the cool evenings. If you lose that diurnal, cool evening, warm day, weather temp pattern, that's really bad for the grapes. Because if the weather stays warmer at night, it kind of stresses the vines out. They're happier. They like to go to bed every night.
And
the Napa fog that rolls in from the bay is kind of famous for that. And in August and September, we can see a full 50-degree temperature swing from the coolest temperature at night or in the early morning to the afternoon.
And why I was asking is because there's a couple studies showing that fog is starting to kind of go away and come in later in the year and stay for shorter amounts of time. So that's kind of where why I was asking the question. But yeah, no, it's good to hear that response because, you know, I do love Cabernet Sauvignon. In Marcelon, not as much.
Well, great question, Jared. And thanks for all your participation tonight.
Yeah.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'll
All
hop
right,
off video again.
Yeah, I will bring somebody else up. So Richard had a question as well. So Richard, let me bring you up to panelist. We'll do, David, are you okay to go just 2 minutes over if we do 2 more questions?
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. And if anyone else has to drop off, then not a problem. We will send the video out, of course. And thank you so much for joining. If you do leave us at 8, but let's see, I think Richard is just getting situated here. So Richard, you'll just have to take yourself off mute and turn on your video. There you are. Wonderful. Hi.
Hey, how are we doing?
Hi there.
So I have a question about your Cabernet Franc. Is it, I think
You have your
you
phone on.
made one.
Turn your phone on.
Is it green pepper or black pepper taste?
Oh. I think Richard, you had your phone was reverberating there, but I think the question, David, was, is your Cabernet Franc more in the green pepper category or more on the black pepper side? How would you describe your Cabernet Franc?
I would describe it as more green pepper herbaceous, definitely. We do blend it with a touch of Cabernet Sauvignon, which kind of rounds it off just a little bit. Sometimes Cabernet Franc can be, for some who are not Cabernet Franc lovers, a bit unapproachable. Our wine is, still has that characteristic angularity and flavor, but it's rounded. The edges are rounded just a little bit with the Cabernet Sauvignon blended with it.
So where do your Cab Franc grapes come from?
The old Cab Franc vineyard that I mentioned at the back of the property.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Richard, for the question. Here, I'll move you back down. And then just in the interest of time, I'm going to bring up one more person, Jim, our lucky tour winner, who also had a question. I'm going to bring you up, and then I'll just have a couple more questions that I saw pop up that we'll do rapid fire at the end. But let's just, actually, while Jim is getting situated, just a quick question from Michael. Are there any other single varietals planned, David?
How do I answer that? We're going to expand our Pinot Noir program. We make a beautiful Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir that comes from a vineyard called Spring Hill. In recent years, I find myself actually drinking more Pinot Noir and more Burgundy than I do Bordeaux or Cabernet Sauvignon. And so it's something that I'm impassioned for. And so we are actually looking to make Pinot Noir from the Santa Lucia Highlands, which is a great growing region in California, down in the Carmel Salinas Valley area.
Great. Well, Michael, stay tuned for that. And now here we have the man himself, Jim. Nice to see you. Thanks very much so much for joining tonight. Congratulations. I'll let you ask your question.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you again, Yule. And so my question was so you're at your 10-year vintage point. What so far is your favorite? By the way, I just want to say before I finish my question, this is the first time I've ever tasted Sinegal wines, which is why I joined the tasting, because I never had the wines. I've seen my California Instagram friends post these wines, and I knew about them, never had them. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to go. So I got all 3 I've tasted tonight, which has been fantastic. I'm back on the Sauv Blanc because honestly, that's my favorite of the night. I hate to say it, but my question is, which is your favorite vintage so far that you've produced in this kind of relatively short time frame, really, in the world of wine?
It really is. It takes a long time to get established. I mean, everybody here in the Valley says I'm still a newcomer, and I've been at it for 10 years. Honestly, the answer is kind of qualified in that we are just simply so much better at what we do now. Between my winemaker, Ryan Kanoth, and I working closely together now for 7 years, to my being much smarter and more informed, making better decisions, to us having a state-of-the-art winemaking facility that we didn't have for the first 3 vintages. It's really, there's been a lot of variables that have influenced where we've landed. But in terms of vintages, I would say for Cabernet specifically, I thought the 2016 vintage was a very special vintage. And then I think the 2019 vintage is a very special vintage, which is our current release on our cabs. As far as the Pinot is concerned, I think our Pinot is definitely more influenced by us developing our craft over time, more so. We did not make Cabernet when we started. So we started in 2017. The 2017 vintage, we actually didn't take that wine to bottle because we were not satisfied with how it turned out. We got into the Pinot business after a trip to Burgundy. My winemaker and I, we had a chance to go to every first growth, all the great chateaus and the domains of Burgundy. And it was through that experience that we learned how to make Pinot. But now, so our Pinot, we're still in that cycle where we're just getting so dramatically better at what we do every year. And frankly, we're getting access to better and better fruit, that our Pinots are just getting better and better.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's something for us to all to look forward to, getting more of the Cabernets and Sauvignons, but then also your Pinots, that seems to be a bit of a focus for you coming up. So Jim, thanks so much for the great question. I will send you back down. And then just before we sign off, David, I just want to give you a chance and give everyone the chance to hear very quickly what you're sort of planning for the future. I know that you're involved in this new project, Details Wines. Do you want to just spend 30 seconds talking about that and sort of what's on the horizon for you with either project?
Sure. Details is a new brand that we launched in 2018 with our Details Cabernet Sauvignon. It's based in Sonoma. So while our roots are in Napa, no pun intended, we recognize that with global warming and with rising fruit costs in Napa, really to make quality of the caliber that we wanted to make it and offer it at the value that we wanted to make it, we really needed to start considering alternate fruit sources to find that right quality value proposition. Because for many people, not the ones here on the call today, but for many folks, spending $100 on a bottle of wine is a lot of money. And so we think our $50 SRP Cabernet Sauvignon opens up a whole new audience, a broader audience, perhaps a younger audience to the great wine making style of Senegal, and gives them a kind of a onboarding path to some of our bigger, better, more prestigious wines.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's definitely a wine for everybody on the call to have a look for. Details. I think you have both a Cabernet and a Sauvignon Blanc, correct? Those are the two that you have right now?
Correct.
Great. Okay. And then so that everybody knows, we will be sending around the video of this conversation and this tasting with David. It was so much fun. We'll be sending this around to everybody, and we'll keep that link where you can still buy more of the wines if you would like. And we may have a little special offer for you in store as well. So stay tuned for more on that. But first, I just want to thank you, David, for spending the evening with us. I'm sorry that we went over a few minutes, but this was fun. I'm sure we could have asked you many, many more questions and gone for quite a while longer, but really appreciate your time.
No worries. It's only 5 o'clock here. So it's, I thank you all for taking the time and staying on the call a little bit later. And it was a pleasure to meet you. And thank you for your thoughtful questions.